Dogen's Shishobi, which are 4 ways that Bodhisattvas benefit humans. And this morning we're appreciating the third way, which is beneficial actions. Or the Japanese word is Rigyo. And what that means is to take care of everyone, every kind of person, whether of high position or low position. And in a business situation, I've seen all kinds of people, and some people are good at managing their managers, and other people are good at managing their subordinates. But you have to manage in both directions if you're going to be effective. It means to take care of them. You need to balance your actions with your understanding. And one of the reasons that there's so much dissension in societies or communities or organizations or in families is that people think someone else gains or moves forward, and when they gain, it's our loss. So some people try to keep others down. But the principle of beneficial actions has no opposition. Then through beneficial action, everyone gains. It's a win-win situation. I had this professor who had a sign on his wall, and it said, "There's no limit to what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit." And when I asked him who wrote that, he said he didn't know. It was anonymous. Nobody got the credit even for that quote. But you all know that there's a lot of game playing that goes on in any kind of organization, including Zen communities, where people take credit for other people's ideas, advance because they think of other people advance, that it's at their detriment. And when I was working in business, I never much cared about that or worried about it, because I always felt it was a good idea. The company benefited, and it benefited everybody as a whole. So if you support people who work for you, they're going to push you up. And if you support those above you, they'll pull you up. So the question is, how do we know what's a beneficial action and what is harmful action? Well, as I've talked about many times in the Zen Peacemakers, there's the 3 tenets of not knowing, bearing witness, and we could say beneficial actions, but the last one sometimes has been loving action or compassionate action. But before he died, Bernie Glassman asked me to head a little group, to look at the exact wording of these 3 tenets. And after much discussion, including Bernie, came to the conclusion that the 3 tenets are not knowing, which means every situation you enter is to come without any preconditions, without any of our prejudices, which is very difficult to do, of course. But that means to really let go of all of our attachments when we enter a situation. The second is bearing witness, which is to be totally present in each situation. I was been reading the autobiography of Ram Dass, and he did some work on death and dying, and he got into it when his own mother was dying, and he had a lot of difficulties with his mother when he was growing up. but when she was on her deathbed, he learned how to just bear witness, just to be present. And just through the very act of being present, it opens up the other person. The defenses fall down, and that you can just be present with each other. And then the third, what Bernie didn't want to give it any kind of a descriptor, like beneficial actions or compassionate actions. And so the way that it's written now, I think you'll find it on the Zen Peacemaker website, is action based on not knowing and bearing witness. So it doesn't allow it to fall in any kind of a category. But how do we know whether it's to be beneficial? Well, if we really empty ourselves and just be present, then it's almost like a koan, and whatever comes up for us, will come up, and we'll know how to deal with it. And there's an analogy that, or it's a metaphor, I guess, that I've talked about, and some of you have heard me talk about it, and it's called the snake and the dragon. And it's describing, different people and how they act. And it talks about the head and the tail of the snake and the dragon. And the head is wisdom or understanding. And the tail is action or compassion. And, if somebody has the head of a dragon and the tail of a snake, that means that they see clearly the situation, but they don't know what to do. So that the action part is not very developed, but the seeing clearly part is developed. And then on the opposite, there's one who has the head of the snake and the tail of the dragon. They don't see very clearly, but they always know what to do. And sometimes, that big tail is just thrashing around, and it can cause as much good as harm. And sometimes those people, there's labels for these people like do-gooders, and I can think of lots of examples of that, particularly in the environmental realm. In Hawaii, apparently, and when they were cultivating pineapples in the pineapple fields, they had rats that were destroying the crop. And so they found out that that mongoose would keep the rat population down. So they imported mongoose. So they no longer had a rat problem, but then they had a mongoose problem. So it's tricky, to know what to do. And we say that somebody who has the head of a dragon and the tail of the dragon is somebody who sees clearly and knows how to act in accord with that. A lot of it, it has to do with our own experience, but it says beneficial actions. So it's also loving actions, and with particularly in a family with children, if you basically have an attitude and an essential nature of wanting your children to succeed and to love them as they are, no matter what you do, they're going to experience that. But of course, that's not always true in the political realm, because sometimes some people will get hurt and others will gain. But let me just finish out this metaphor. If somebody has the head of a snake and the tail of a snake, that means they don't see anything clearly, but that's okay, because they don't do anything either. No harm at all. And so their actions, if they have any, which is saying that they're very inactive, could be beneficial, but that kind of a person, you know, it doesn't raise any waves. But I was just reading a news article on the internet, and about this idea of you know, zero sum. When they talk in politics and economics, zero sum, that's always what somebody gains something. This always has to be at the cost to somebody else, and somebody has to lose something for somebody to gain. And so that's caused a lot of and particularly in the area of white supremacy or racism, to keep blacks down. If they improve their station, that means you're going to lose something. And there was this article, can't remember which news site I read it, but it had to do with a swimming pool in St. Louis, which was built in the 19th century, you know, and at that time it was a huge swimming pool, you know, and they had sand beaches around it with platforms in the center. And I've never seen that one, but my mother was born and raised in Omaha, and there was a place called Peony Park in Omaha that was like that. It was a man-made lake and a swimming hole with these towers in the middle. You could climb up and dive off into the lake, and all kinds of things, and beaches. But then when I think it was might have been in the 30s or 40s, when they started integrating. Of course, it was all whites that used these swimming pools, these public swimming pools. This blacks started going in there, and instead to use it, and the whites stopped going. And so what the government did is just shut it down, you know. And so you know, so to keep the blacks from using it, the whites lost, you know. They lost out in the swimming pool, you know. So that was an example of a lose-lose, you know, rather than a win-win, you know, where they could both have the advantages of using it. And this came out of a book from some black scholar who was talking about a lot. That's one of the problems with the zero-sum mentality, that the pie isn't limited, you know, and that's true in our practice, you know. You know, we draw the enso, you know, the Zen circle. They see a lot of calligraphies of that, but it means, you know, everything is continuous. But the circle is called it's a dai enso, and dai is a word, a character that means large or big, but it's so big that there's no outside, you know. So I think that as we grow and as we learn more and as we share with more people, it's not like when you learn something, it's not that you're taking away from the knowledge of others, but you're, you know, you're adding to it, you know, and then our understanding continues to grow. And when Einstein was asked why he was so brilliant, he said because he stood on the shoulders of giants, and what he was doing was complimenting those who came before him. You know, so in our practice, we're standing on the shoulders of our ancestors, you know, and as those of you who are doing koans know, I mean, we learn from all of our ancestors. You know, they're passing their knowledge to us, and we're growing. And there's a saying in Zen too, that if the student doesn't surpass the teacher, that the teaching will die out. Not that you try to keep the students down. I had a Zen teacher tell me, he says, I'm not creating successors, I'm creating competitors. And I said, what? You know? And what he meant was, you know, that they're forming other centers, and then they're taking students away, and he's not having as many students as, you know, but as they say in in Spain, no importa, you know, whoever comes and practices with you, and that's our karma, that's what our karma is. So how do we know what's to be beneficial?